Story 1. The mile THAT. The odometer clicked over to 1,247,893 miles, and Robert Hayes watched his windshield wipers smear ice across the glass in the exact same pattern they had 3 minutes ago. Same streak on the left. Same missed spot, shaped like a kidney bean on the right. Same frozen chunk that tumbled across his field of vision and disappeared over the hood. He'd been driving the Dalton Highway for 6 hours, but according to his GPS, he hadn't moved past mile marker crossfeed relay station 47 in what his phone said was the last 47 minutes. His truck was moving. The engine growled. The tires gripped asphalt, but Alaska wasn't letting him leave. Robert had been hauling freight to Deadhorse for 11 years, ever since his discharge from the Marines left him with a rebuilt knee and a desperate need for solitude. The Dalton Highway provided both. 414 miles of frozen emptiness stretching from Livengood to Prudhoe Bay, where the only company was Caribou, the occasional ice road trucker, and the kind of darkness that made men remember why their ancestors feared the night. He preferred the winter runs when tourism died and the road belonged to professionals who understood that this wasn't a highway. It was a challenge. But tonight, December 9th, 2022, the Dalton had stopped being a road and become something else entirely. The repeating started small. He'd noticed the same distinctive birch tree bent at a 45-degree angle 3 times in 10 minutes, wrote it off to exhaustion, to the hypnotic sameness of the Alaskan wilderness. But then he passed the abandoned Dodge pickup with the shattered passenger window, the one with help scraped into the ice on the driver's side door. Once, twice, 7 times. Each time his odometer climbed. Each time his GPS insisted he was stationary at mile marker 47. Each time that same streak on his windshield appeared in the exact same pattern, like the universe was stuttering. Robert grabbed his CB radio. "This is Ironside hauling north on the Dalton. Anyone copy?" Static answered, but underneath it something else. A rhythmic thumping that matched his heartbeat. He tried again. "Any northbound or southbound traffic, this is Ironside at mile marker 47, requesting confirmation of location." The static shifted, and for just a moment he heard his own voice coming back to him. "This is Ironside at mile marker 47, requesting confirmation." But the voice on the radio sounded tired, older, like it had been asking that same question for years. He slammed the CB down and focused on the road. The headlights carved a tunnel through darkness so complete it felt physical, pressing against the windows like black water. The thermometer read -38 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, brake fluid thickened, diesel gelled, and human skin froze in under a minute. The Dalton didn't forgive mistakes, but the cold wasn't what made his hands shake on the steering wheel. Mile marker 47 appeared again, the same marker with the same spray paint graffiti that read "Turn back." He depassed it 19 times now. He was counting. The 23rd time he passed the bent birch tree, Robert saw the other truck. A Peterbilt 579 blue paint job parked on the shoulder with its hazards flashing. The exact model and color he drove. He eased off the accelerator, his gut clenching with dread he couldn't name. As he rolled past, his headlights illuminated the cab. A man sat in the driver's seat. A man with Robert's gray beard, Robert's faded Marine's baseball cap, Robert's scar across his left eyebrow. The doppelganger turned to look at him, and its eyes were solid black, like someone had filled the sockets with crude oil. It raised one hand in a slow wave, and Robert saw that its fingers were too long, the joints bending in too many places. Robert stomped the accelerator. The engine roared. 80 miles per hour on ice was suicide, but whatever was behind him was worse. His trailer fishtailed, the Jake brake screaming as he tried to regain control. The speedometer needle buried itself at 95. Trees became a blur of white and black. Mile marker 47 appeared again. He was back at the same spot, same stretch of road, the same birch tree, the same abandoned Dodge, but now the blue Peterbilt was gone from the shoulder. He jerked his head to check the mirrors. Empty road behind him, empty road ahead. His radio crackled to life without him touching it. "You can't outrun the mile, Robert." His own voice, but wrong, hollow, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. "I tried for 3 weeks before I understood." Who the fuck is this? Robert's voice cracked. I'm you, the you from 5 loops ago, or maybe 6. Hard to keep count after the first 100. The radio hissed. Check your fuel gauge. Robert's eyes snapped to the dashboard. 3/4 full. It had been 3/4 full when he entered this scent. Wretch of Highway 6 hours ago. Time doesn't move forward here, his voice continued from the radio. It just circles like a record with a scratch, and every time you go around, something gets copied. You get copied. But the copies aren't quite right. Check your mirror. The driver's side 1. Robert didn't want to look. His body was screaming at him not to look, but his eyes betrayed him, sliding to the mirror. A figure stood on the road behind his truck, illuminated in his red taillights. Robert Hayes, wearing his own clothes, his own face. But this version's jaw hung too loose, dislocated, swinging like a broken gate. As he watched, another figure stepped out of the darkness beside it. Another Robert, this one missing the left side of his face, the skull visible through transparent flesh. Every loop creates another copy, the radio said. And the copies are hungry. They want to be real again. They want to be the original. Do you know how they try to become real, Robert? A third figure emerged from the tree line. Then a fourth, a fifth, all wearing his face, all wrong in different ways. One had arms that reached its knees. Another's head tilted at an angle that should have snapped its neck. They began walking toward his truck. Robert dropped the gear shift and punched the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires fighting for purchase on ice. In his side mirrors, the figures broke into a run. They moved wrong, joints bending backwards, limbs scissoring at impossible angles, but they were fast. Faster than anything human should be. Mile marker 47 appeared in his headlights. No, 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 no. Robert was sobbing now, tears freezing on his cheeks despite the heater blasting at full power. He'd made it less than 30 seconds before the loop reset. The figures were gone from his mirrors, but he knew they'd be back. Every loop they'd be back. Every loop there would be more of them. His phone buzzed, a text message, even though there was no signal out here, never had been. The sender was listed as Robert Hayes. The message read, Loop 247, still counting. They caught me in loop 198. I'm one of them now. You will be too. We all become them eventually. The mile needs us. The mile is us. Every version that ever drove through. All feeding it, all becoming it. Another text. Don't close your eyes. When you close your eyes, you give them permission to get closer. I learned that in loop 89. Another, the hunger is worse than you think. We're hollow. We need to fill ourselves with the real you, with your warmth, with your forward motion, with your time. We'll peel it out of you like meat from a shell. Robert's hands were numb on the wheel. His breath came in rapid gasps that fogged the windshield. The road stretched ahead, infinite and unchanging. The bent birch tree appeared again. Loop 248, or was it 249? He was losing count. The blue Peterbilt sat on the shoulder again, but this time dozens of figures surrounded it. All him, all wrong. They turned in unison as his headlights swept across them and began running. Not toward him, alongside him, keeping pace with his truck at 70 miles per hour, their legs pumping in mechanical rhythm, their faces pressed against his windows. One grabbed his door handle. Another climbed onto his hood, spreading itself across his windshield like a spider, its mouth opening impossibly wide. Robert screamed and jerked the wheel. The truck left the road, crashed through the snow berm, and plunged into the trees. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. His head cracked against the steering wheel, and the world went dark. When he opened his eyes, he was back on the road. Engine idling, hands on the wheel. Mile marker 47 approaching in his headlights. The odometer read 1,247,893 miles. His windshield wipers smeared ice in that same pattern. Streak on the left. Kidney bean shape on the right. Frozen chunk tumbling across his field of vision. His CB crackled. This is Ironside at mile marker 47. His own voice, but he hadn't touched the radio. I've been here a long time now. The loops get shorter. The copies get closer. I'm not sure which one I am anymore. Sometimes I think I'm outside the truck, running alongside it. Sometimes I think I'm still inside, watching myself from outside. Sometimes I think I've always been here, that I never existed anywhere else. That Robert Hayes was just something the mile dreamed up to feed itself. Robert looked down at his hands on the steering wheel. In the dim dashboard light, he could see through them, just slightly, just enough to see the steering wheel underneath, visible through his translucent flesh. His radio, using his voice. "Welcome to loop 250, Robert. Or are you a copy already? Can you tell the difference anymore?" He couldn't. The bent birch tree appeared in his headlights. His windshield wipers made their pattern. In his mirrors, figures began to emerge from the darkness, all wearing his face, all walking toward him with arms outstretched. Etched, the mile marker passed on his right, 47. And somewhere in another loop or another time or another version of this frozen hell, Robert Hayes kept driving, kept counting, kept becoming less real with every repetition until the distinction between driver and copy and mile marker and darkness disappeared entirely, and there was only the loop, feeding on itself forever. The GPS still said he hadn't moved. His phone disagreed, marking location after location, each one reading mile marker 47, stacking coordinates on top of each other like bodies in a mass grave, all of them him, all of them trapped, all of them feeding the hungry mile that repeated and repeated and repeated. Story 2, the skin frequency. Patricia Sullivan's CB radio shouldn't have been able to pick up signals on that frequency. Channel 9 was emergency only. Channel 19 was trucker standard. But 66.6 didn't exist on any CB manufactured in the last 40 years. The dial shouldn't have been able to turn that far. Yet there it was, the frequency display glowing a faint amber in the darkness of her cab, and the voice coming through wasn't using words anymore. It was using something else. Something that made her teeth ache and her vision swim and her skin try to crawl off her body in different directions. The voice had started normally enough 3 hours ago, just past Fairbanks on the Richardson Highway. "Breaker, breaker, this is Phantom running southbound looking for directions to the Gacona Junction turnoff." Standard trucker talk. Patricia had responded because that's what you did out here. Alaska's highways were too empty, too deadly, too willing to kill you for small mistakes. Truckers helped truckers. It was religion. But when she'd replied, giving clear directions, the voice had said, "Thank you, your skin sounds beautiful." And then the frequency had changed on its own, the dial spinning to 66.6, and the voice had continued. "I'd like to wear it. Would you let me wear it? I haven't worn real skin in so long." Now at 2:47 a.m. on January 3rd, 2023, Patricia's hands were welded to the steering wheel, and she couldn't remember how to let go. Every time she tried, the voice from the CB radio would make a sound like tearing fabric, and her fingers would spasm and lock tighter. The voice was teaching her body a new language, and her body was learning faster than her mind could reject it. Patricia had been hauling cargo across Alaska for 7 years, ever since her divorce left her with a daughter to support and a desperate need to be anywhere but Arizona. The solitude suited her. The darkness didn't bother her. She'd driven through whiteout blizzards, had slid across black ice, had watched the northern lights paint the sky while hauling 40,000 pounds of frozen fish. She wasn't easy to scare, but fear had rules. Fear was a response to danger. What she felt now wasn't fear. It was deeper than that. It was her body's recognition that something was trying to rewrite the rules of what she was. "You're still listening," the voice said from the CB. It didn't sound like radio transmission anymore. It sounded like it was coming from inside her cab, inside her head. "That's good. That means you're ready. Your frequency matches mine now. Do you feel it?" She did. Her skin was vibrating, not shaking. Vibrating like every cell was trying to oscillate at a different speed. She looked down at her left hand on the steering wheel and watched her skin ripple. Just slightly. Just enough to see the muscle underneath, the way you might see movement under bedsheets. Her skin was becoming loose. "Stop," Patricia managed to say. Her voice sounded wrong, thick, like her tongue was swelling. "I can't stop," the voice replied. "You answered my frequency. You invited me in. That's how it works. I broadcast, and if someone responds, if someone matches my wavelength, then we can share. I share myself with you, and you share your skin with me. It's fair. It's beautiful. It's the only way I can be real again." The Richardson Highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. She was hauling printer paper, 42 pallets of it, from Anchorage to Delta Junction. A boring run. A safe run. Nothing supernatural about paper. But the CB radio was mounted on her dashboard, and the dial was spinning on its own now, oscillating between 66.6 and 66.7, and with each fluctuation, her skin loosened a little more. Patricia grabbed the CB handset with her right hand, forcing her fingers to unlock from the steering wheel. The moment her skin touched the plastic, a jolt of electricity shot up her arm and she heard the voice laugh. Not from the speakers, from her own throat. Her mouth had opened on its own and someone else's laugh was coming out. Yes, her voice said, but she hadn't decided to speak. Yes, that's right. Touch the frequency. Touch me. Let me in deeper. She hurled the handset away. It bounced off the passenger seat and dangled by its cord ending slowly, but the voice didn't stop. It was inside her now, vibrating through her bones. You can't throw me away, the voice said from her mouth. I'm not in the radio anymore. I'm in your frequency. I'm in the wavelength your body produces. Did you know bodies produce frequencies, electrical impulses? Brain waves, the heart's electromagnetic field. You're a biological radio station, Patricia, and I've found your channel. Her right hand moved on its own, reaching for the CB dial. She tried to stop it, tried to pull back, but her muscles weren't listening to her brain anymore. They were listening to something else. Her hand turned the dial. The frequency display changed. 66.7, 66.8, 66.9. With each increment, the voice grew stronger. I was a trucker too, the voice said through her mouth while her own thoughts screamed inside her skull. Drove the Richardson in 1987. March 14th. Hit a moose at mile marker 92. The impact crushed my cab and I burned for 7 minutes before the fuel tank exploded. 7 minutes of my skin crisping, bubbling, sliding off like wet paper. 7 minutes of screaming frequencies into the night. And something heard me, something in the space between radio waves. Something that lives in the gaps of communication, feeding on signals. On the electromagnetic spectrum we pollute with our constant noise. Patricia's left hand released the steering wheel. Both hands began moving across her body, touching her arms, her neck, her face. She could feel through her fingers, but she couldn't control them. They were being puppeted by the frequency, and they were checking her skin, testing its fit. It offered me a deal, her voice continued. I could live in the frequencies, I could ride the radio waves, exist in the spaces between channels, but I couldn't be physical anymore, I couldn't touch, I couldn't feel. Unless I found someone on my frequency, unless I found someone whose biological wavelength matched the frequency I died on. 66.6 megahertz, the frequency of burning flesh, the frequency of a dying scream. The truck was drifting. Patricia's eyes could see the road veering left, but her hands wouldn't correct. They were too busy touching her skin, and now they were finding the edges. Her fingernails dug into her left forearm, and she felt the skin separate from the muscle underneath. No blood, no pain, just the sensation of a seam opening like unzipping a jacket. No, Patricia's real voice managed to break through. No, you can't do this. I'm not doing it, the frequency said through her mouth. You are. Your body recognizes me now. It thinks I'm the new operating frequency. It's trying to accommodate me. It's making room. And once I'm settled in, once I learn how to maintain this frequency, you'll go where I went, into the spaces between, into the static. You'll be the one calling out, looking for skin. Her hands peeled a strip of skin from her forearm. It came away like a glove, intact and hollow, and underneath was normal muscle and tissue, but it was covered in a faint glow, like her body was backlit by electricity. The skin glove dangled from her hand, and she watched her fingers, his fingers, examine it with fascination. The truck hit the rumble strips on the shoulder. The vibration snapped something loose in Patricia's mind, a moment of clarity. She was still in here. The frequency hadn't taken everything yet. She grabbed the steering wheel with her glowing, skinless hand and jerked it right, overcorrecting. The truck swerved back onto the highway, trailer whipping behind her. Don't fight, the voice said, calmer now. Fighting makes it hurt. When I fought, when I tried to climb out of my burning cab, my skin slewed off in sheets. Do you want that? Patricia's foot stomped the brake. The truck shuddered, engine roaring as the Jake brake kicked in. 42 pallets of paper shifted in the trailer, weight slamming forward. She brought the truck to a stop in the middle of the Richardson Highway, hazards on, and tried to think through the voice in her head. The CB dial. If she was producing a frequency, if her body had somehow matched this thing's wavelength, maybe she could change it. Maybe she could detune herself, get off his channel. Her right hand, still under his control, reached for her face. She felt fingernails dig into her cheek, felt the skin begin to separate. With her left hand, still hers, barely, she grabbed a screwdriver from the door panel storage and stabbed it into the CB radio. Sparks erupted. The display shattered. The voice screamed, and for a moment her right hand spasmed and released her face. Patricia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the CB radio, ripped it from its mounting, and hurled it through the passenger window. Glass exploded outward into the -42-degree night. The radio tumbled across the frozen highway and disappeared into the snowbank. Silence blessed empty silence. Patricia touched her face. The skin was still attached. She looked at her left arm. The strip of skin was still peeled away, but it had stopped spreading. Her muscle glowed faintly underneath, tiny sparks of bioelectricity dancing across the tissue. She sat in the freezing cab, passenger window gone, and breathed. One breath, two, three. The cold was already seeping in, dangerous cold, the kind that killed. She'd need to do something about the window. She'd need to keep moving. She'd need to. Her radio crackled. The CB radio she'd just thrown out the window. She could hear it faint and distant somewhere out in the snow. You can't destroy the frequency. It's not in the radio, it's in you. It's always been in you, I just activated it. You're a transmitter now, Patricia. You're broadcasting on my channel, and I'm not the only one listening. She looked in her side mirror. Figures stood on the highway behind her truck, illuminated in her red taillights. 7 of them. Each one was just a hollow skin, translucent and empty, standing upright like someone had removed the person inside and left only the outer layer. They swayed in the wind like flags, and they were moving closer. Patricia slammed the truck into gear and punched the accelerator. The figures began to run, their hollow legs scissoring impossibly fast, their empty arms reaching. In her rearview mirror, she watched them give chase, and she understood with sick certainty that they were trying to fill themselves. They were trying to find the frequency that would let them wear new skin. Her arm was still glowing. The peeled strip of skin dangled from her wrist, and underneath her remaining skin she could feel it loosening, responding to a signal she couldn't stop transmitting. The frequency was part of her now. She was the radio, she was the channel, she was the broadcast. 66.6 megahertz, the frequency of burning flesh, the frequency of skin separating from bone, and somewhere out there in the darkness others were tuning in, finding her signal, learning her wavelength, coming to share, coming to wear what she couldn't keep. Patricia drove faster, but the figures in her mirror multiplied. 8, 12, 20. All of them hollow, all of them empty, all of them listening to the frequency her body wouldn't stop broadcasting, the frequency that was teaching her skin how to let go. Story 3, The Phantom Fuel. Marcus Chen's fuel gauge read full, but his truck had been drinking something else for the last 93 miles. He'd noticed it around Talk when the diesel started smelling wrong. Not the usual petroleum stink, but something organic, copper and salt. When he'd climbed down to check the tank at a pullout near mile marker 1314, his flashlight beam had caught something dark and viscous dripping from the tank's seam. He'd touched it, warm, almost body temperature. And when he'd lifted his finger to examine the substance, he'd realized with skin-crawling certainty that it was blood. His truck was running on blood, and it was running beautifully, smoother than it had in 3 years. The engine purred. The transmission shifted like silk. Whatever was in his fuel tank, his Kenworth T680 loved it more than the $700 of diesel he'd filled up with in Anchorage that morning. Marcus had been driving since he was 19, following his father into the business after college proved too expensive and too pointless. 22 years on the road had taught him that trucks had personalities. They had moods. His Kenworth, which he'd bought used in 2019, had always been temperamental. Rough starts, hard shifts, a persistent rattle in the exhaust that no mechanic could fix. But now, running on blood, she was perfect. And that perfection terrified him more than any breakdown ever had. The Alaska highway stretched ahead through darkness so complete that his headlights seemed to barely dent it. January 7th, 2023, temperature at -47 degrees, and Marcus was hauling electrical equipment from Fairbanks to Whitehorse. Standard run, boring freight, nothing that should have caused this. But at some point between Tok and the Canadian border, his truck had changed its diet, and Marcus didn't know if he should stop her or let her feed. His fuel gauge still read full. After 93 miles of driving, that was impossible. He burned roughly 6 miles per gallon, meaning he should have used at least 15 gallons. But the needle sat at full, and when he'd checked the gauge's accuracy by cross-referencing with his trip computer, the numbers confirmed it. His tank wasn't emptying, it was filling. Marcus grabbed his phone and pulled up the fuel station receipt from Anchorage. 212 gallons of diesel. Tank capacity on his Kenworth was 300 gallons. He started the trip at 70% full. He should have been down to maybe 60% by now. But the gauge read 100%, which meant somewhere in the last hour and a half, his truck had gained fuel. Had generated it, had made it from nothing. Or from something else. He pulled over at mile marker 1407, the truck's air brakes hissing like a satisfied sigh. The darkness outside was absolute. No moon, heavy cloud cover blocking the stars. His headlights illuminated falling snow and the edge of the Alaska highway, beyond which existed only trees and mountains and emptiness. No other vehicles, no buildings, no signs of human life in any direction. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and his wrench and climbed down from the cab. The cold hit him like a physical blow, the kind of cold that burned exposed skin and turned breath to ice crystals in your lungs. He moved quickly to the fuel tank, mounted on the driver's side behind the cab. The tank was warm to the touch. He could feel the heat through his insulated gloves. He unscrewed the fuel cap and pointed his flashlight into the tank. The beam caught liquid, but it was the wrong color. Too dark, too red. The smell hit him immediately. Iron and copper and something else, something that reminded him of the butcher shop his grandmother had run in Seattle, that specific scent of fresh meat and spilled life. Blood, gallons of it. His 300-gallon fuel tank was filled with blood. Marcus staggered back, his breath coming in rapid gasps that burned his throat. This wasn't possible. Blood couldn't combust in a diesel engine. Blood would clog the fuel lines, destroy the injectors, seize the engine in minutes. But his truck was running better than ever. His truck was thriving on it. He heard the sound then coming from inside the engine compartment. A rhythmic thumping, steady, organic, like a heartbeat. He moved to the front of the truck and popped the hood, and the wash of heat that poured out was wrong. Diesel engines ran hot, but this was different. This was body heat. This was the warmth of something alive. His flashlight beam swept across the engine block, and Marcus saw that the metal had changed. The steel was covered in a thin membrane, translucent and veined, that pulsed in time with the heartbeat sound. The fuel lines were no longer rubber and metal. They were arteries, thick and organic, connected to the engine block like vessels feeding an organ, and the engine itself was breathing. The pistons weren't just moving mechanically. They were contracting and expanding like muscle tissue, like a living heart pumping blood through a body. His truck had become biological, and it was hungry. Marcus slammed the hood shut and backed away. He needed to think. He needed to understand. His truck couldn't run on blood. Physics didn't allow it. Biology didn't allow it. But he'd driven 93 miles, and his truck was drinking something that wasn't diesel, and she was becoming something that wasn't entirely machine anymore. His CB radio crackled to life in the cab, even though he'd turned it off. A voice, female, distorted. "You fed her. You gave her what she needed. Now she'll never let you stop." Marcus climbed back into the cab, his hands shaking. "Who is this?" "Someone who drove this truck before you, before she was a Kenworth, before she was anything with a brand name. She's older than that. Older than trucks. She's the thing that roads were built for, the hunger that waits under asphalt. And once she tastes blood, once she learns how to make her own fuel, she won't run on anything else." "That's insane," Marcus said, but his voice was weak. He could feel the heartbeat through the steering wheel. The whole cab was pulsing gently, rhythmically, like he was sitting inside a chest cavity. "Check your route," the voice said. "Check where she's taking you." Marcus pulled up his GPS. The route from Fairbanks to Whitehorse was simple: follow the Alaska Highway southeast. But his GPS was showing a different route. The line on the screen curved off the highway at mile marker 1425 onto a road that didn't exist on any map. A road that led into the mountains, into the wilderness, into nothing. and his truck was steering him toward it. He grabbed the steering wheel and tried to maintain control, tried to keep the truck on the highway. But the wheel was moving on its own, turning gently to the right. The engine's heartbeat accelerated, eager. The fuel gauge ticked even higher, past full, into a red zone that shouldn't exist. She was overflowing with blood, and she wanted more. "Where is she taking me?" Marcus demanded into the CB. "To the feeding ground, where she goes when she's ready to replenish. There are places in Alaska where the earth is thin, where the old things from before humanity can still push through. Your truck found 1 year ago, before you owned her, before your father owned her, before anyone who thinks they owned her. She was born there, and she returns there when she needs to fill her tank." Mile marker 1425 appeared in his headlights. The turnoff was visible now, even though it hadn't been marked on any map. A narrow road, barely wide enough for his truck, disappearing into the trees, and his truck was turning onto it, regardless of what Marcus wanted. "No," he said, slamming his foot on the brake. The truck didn't slow. The brake pedal pushed back against his foot with muscular resistance, and the heartbeat sound grew louder, angrier. The steering wheel spun out of his grip, and his hands burned where the wheel's surface had suddenly grown hot. Not mechanically hot, feverishly hot, like touching inflamed skin. The truck accelerated down the unmarked road. Trees pressed in on both sides, their branches scraping against the trailer with sounds that were too much like fingernails on flesh. The road descended, winding deeper into the wilderness, and Marcus realized that the snow was wrong. It wasn't white. It was darkening, taking on a rust-red color that became more pronounced with every mile. The blood outside was rising. He was driving into a valley filled with blood. "She'll park at the feeding ground," the CB voice said. "And then she'll open her tank and the blood will flow back to its source. She'll drink deep. She'll fill every line, every chamber, every part of herself. And when she's full, she'll need a driver to take her back to the highway. She'll need someone to help her hunt for more. That's what drivers are for. That's what we've always been for. The hands that steer while she feeds." The road leveled out, and Marcus saw the feeding ground. A depression in the earth roughly 200 yards across, filled with blood that steamed in the frozen air. Not snow, not water, blood. Thousands of gallons of it pooled in the frozen wilderness, and at the center of the pool, half submerged, were other trucks. Dozens of them. Old models, new models, some so ancient they might have been from the 1920s. All of them connected to the blood pool by organic fuel lines that pulsed and writhed like feeding tubes. His truck drove to the edge of the pool and stopped. The engine's heartbeat slowed to a resting rhythm, satisfied. Home. And Marcus felt his door unlock on its own, the handle turning without his input, inviting him to step out and witness the feeding. He didn't want to look, but his body was moving, climbing down from the cab, boots crunching on blood-soaked snow. The cold should have frozen the blood instantly, but it remained liquid, steaming, alive. His truck's fuel tank opened with a sound like a mouth yawning, and a thick organic tube extended from the tank opening, stretching toward the blood pool. "Feed for 6 hours, the CB voice said, now coming from all the trucks simultaneously, a chorus of drivers who'd been consumed by this place. "And then she'll need to hunt again. She'll need to find more blood, animal blood, human blood. She's not particular, she just needs fuel, and you'll help her. You'll drive her to remote areas where people go missing and no one asks questions. You'll learn to ignore the sounds from the tank. You'll learn to appreciate how smoothly she runs on fresh fuel." What? Marcus ran. He didn't think, just moved, sprinting away from his truck, from the feeding ground, back up the road toward the highway. The cold tore at his lungs. His legs pumped through red snow. Behind him, he heard engines starting. All of them. The feeding trucks waking up, their headlights blazing to life, illuminating the blood pool in harsh white light. They came after him, not fast. They didn't need to be fast. He was on foot in -47-degree cold, miles from the highway, miles from any help. The trucks rolled forward slowly, their engines purring with that organic heartbeat sound, and Marcus understood that they weren't trying to catch him. They were herding him, steering him, pushing him back toward the feeding ground. He made it 3/4 of a mile before his legs gave out. The cold had won. He collapsed in the red snow, his body shutting down, and heard the trucks surround him. Their engines idled. Their headlights created a circle of light with him at the center. And in the distance, making its way slowly up the road, was his Kenworth. She disconnected from the feeding ground. She was coming to collect him. His CB radio, still in the truck, broadcast its final message, and he could hear it clearly across the frozen air. You belong to her now, you fed her, you drove her. And now she'll take care of you, she'll keep you warm, she'll keep you fed. She'll make you part of her fuel, and when she's consumed everything you are, she'll find another driver. She'll always find another driver. The highway provides. Marcus felt the warmth first. His truck had reached him, and her engine heat was washing over his frozen body, and it felt so good after the burning cold. He felt the fuel line extend from her tank, the organic tube approaching him with gentle, almost tender movements. He felt it touch his skin, felt it search for an entry point. And he felt it slide into his body, connecting him to her tank, beginning the process of converting him from driver to fuel. The last thing Marcus Chen saw was his fuel gauge, visible through his windshield, beginning to rise again. Full, past full. Into the red zone, she was feeding, and she would continue feeding, because trucks need fuel. And in the deep places of Alaska where the old hungers still live, some trucks have learned to make their own. Story 4, The Convoy That Follows. Sarah Mitchell saw the convoy in her mirrors for the first time at 11:47 p.m., and the wrongness of it hit her immediately. 7 trucks, all identical Freightliner Cascadias, all black, all running without headlights in the pitch darkness of the Glen Highway. They appeared suddenly like they'd materialized from nothing, maintaining perfect formation exactly 200 yards behind her trailer. Not gaining, not falling back, just following. She'd been alone on this stretch of highway for 40 minutes. No traffic, no lights except her own. The January darkness was complete, and the road between Palmer and Glenallen was empty this late on a Wednesday night. But now there were 7 trucks behind her, and Sarah's gut was screaming that they shouldn't exist. Sarah had been hauling freight for 9 years, and she'd learned to trust her instincts. Instincts said don't stop for hitchhikers at night. Instincts said avoid black ice in shadows. Instincts said when 7 identical trucks appear from nowhere and follow you in perfect military formation without headlights at midnight on an empty Alaskan highway, something is catastrophically wrong. She grabbed her CB radio. Breaker, this is Nighthawk running eastbound on the Glen, mile marker 98. Got 7 trucks on my tail. Anyone copy? Static. She tried again. Convoy running dark behind me, requesting identification. More static, but underneath it, something rhythmic, mechanical, like the sound of synchronized engines breathing in unison. The convoy matched her speed exactly. When she accelerated to 70, they accelerated to 70. When she slowed to 60, they slowed to 60. The formation never wavered. 200 yards, perfect spacing between each truck. No drivers visible in the cabs, though that might have been the darkness and distance. But Sarah had 20/20 vision, and she couldn't see anyone behind those wheels. She tried her CB again. This time a voice answered, male, flat, no emotion. The convoy escorts those who have been marked. Do not stop. Do not leave the highway. Maintain your current speed. Who the hell is this? Sarah demanded. What convoy? What marking? Check your right shoulder, the voice said. You'll find the answer. Sarah didn't want to check. Every fiber of her being screamed not to look. But her right hand released the steering wheel and moved to her shoulder, pulling down the collar of her flannel shirt. Her fingers touched skin, then touched something else, something that shouldn't be there, raised tissue, scar tissue, in a pattern. She risked a glance while keeping her eyes mostly on the road. Her right shoulder bore a mark she'd never seen before. Fresh, like it had been there for weeks, but she was only now noticing. A symbol burned into her skin, 7 vertical lines with a horizontal line through them. A tally mark, a count. And as she watched, the symbol glowed faintly red, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. What the fuck did you do to me? Sarah shouted into the CB. We didn't do anything, the voice replied. You were marked before you were born. Some people are, 1 in every 100,000. You carry the resonance, the frequency of the old roads, the highways that existed before humans built over them. And when you drive alone at night, when you cross certain thresholds, the convoy recognizes you. The convoy comes to take you home. Sarah's hands were shaking on the wheel. She'd never seen this mark before. She de-showered that morning. She'd gotten dressed. She would have noticed a fucking brand on her shoulder. This is insane. You're insane. I don't have any mark. I'm not going anywhere with you. Look again, the voice said. She looked. The mark was larger now. The 7 lines had multiplied. 14 lines, 21. The symbol was spreading across her shoulder, creeping toward her neck, and it was warm, not painful, just warm, like a hand resting on her skin. A hand she couldn't see. A hand that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. In her mirrors, the convoy drew closer. 150 yards, 100. They were still running dark, still in perfect formation, but now she could see into the cabs. Empty. All 7 trucks were empty. No drivers, no passengers, just trucks driving themselves through the Alaskan night, following her, herding her, guiding her toward something she couldn't name but could feel approaching with absolute certainty. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text message from her mother who'd been dead for 3 years. The message read, "Do. Fight them, sweetie, we've all been marked. Grandma drove for them, I drove for them. Now it's your turn. The convoy takes care of its own. You'll understand once you reach the depot." "No," Sarah whispered. "No, this isn't real." But her shoulder was burning now, the mark expanding across her back, wrapping around her ribs like fingers. The symbol had become a map, a route. She could feel it in her skin, a path being drawn on her body, showing her where the convoy wanted her to go. The voice on the CB, "Mile marker 127, take the turnoff. You won't see it until you're there. It only exists for the marked." "I'm not taking any turnoff," Sarah said, but even as she spoke, her hands were betraying her. They turned the steering wheel to the right, not violently, gently, naturally, like this had always been the plan, like her body knew the route better than her mind did. Mile marker 127 appeared in her headlights, and beside it, impossibly, a turnoff that hadn't been there before. A wide, well-maintained road stretching into the darkness, marked with reflective signs that read depot access convoy personnel only. The road hadn't existed 5 seconds ago. Sarah knew this stretch of the Glen Highway. She'd driven it 100 times. There was no turnoff at mile marker 127, but there it was, and her truck was taking it. The convoy followed her onto the new road. Their formation tightened. They were within 50 yards now, close enough that Sarah could see their grills in her mirrors, massive chrome mouths reflecting her taillights. The trucks weren't just following anymore. They were surrounding her. 3 moved up on her left, 3 on her right. 1 remained behind. She was in the center of a formation, a convoy of ghosts, and they were all going home. The road descended into a valley that shouldn't exist. Sarah knew the geography of this area. There were no valleys here, just gradual slopes and frozen rivers and endless boreal forest. But the road was taking her down, 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 into a depression in the earth that had no business existing, and at the bottom of that depression, lit by sodium vapor lights that turned everything the color of old bones, was the depot. It stretched for miles, a massive trucking facility bigger than any Sarah had ever seen, hundreds of loading docks, thousands of parking spaces, warehouses that could swallow small towns, and every single parking space was filled with a truck, old trucks, new trucks, trucks from decades past, and trucks that looked like they hadn't been invented yet, all of them black, all of them identical, all of them empty. The convoy guided her to an empty parking space, space number 127, and Sarah felt her foot press the brake without her input. Her truck slowed, stopped. The engine shut off, and the mark on her shoulder stopped burning, settling into a comfortable warmth that spread through her entire body. "Welcome home," the CB voice said. "You've been coming here your whole life, every time you felt the urge to drive. Every time the open road called to you, that wasn't wanderlust. That was the depot pulling you back. This is where you belong. This is where all the marked eventually end up." Sarah's door opened on its own. She climbed down, her body moving on autopilot, and stood in the sodium light of the depot. The other trucks in the convoy had parked around her, forming a protective circle. Their engines ticked as they cooled, and from each truck a figure emerged. They looked human at first glance, but only at first glance. They were thin, too thin, like someone had stretched human bodies to twice their normal length. Their limbs were elongated, their fingers reaching their knees, their necks impossibly tall, and they all bore the mark. The 7 lines, the tally, glowing on their skin like brand marks, covering every inch of visible flesh until they were more symbol than person. "You're one of us now," one of the figures said, and Sarah recognized the voice from the CB. "The marked, the convoy, we drive the old roads, we haul cargo that shouldn't exist. We're the infrastructure of a world beneath the world you thought you knew. And once you're marked, you can never leave. The depot won't let you. It needs drivers. It needs truckers who understand that some loads have to be delivered, no matter what they contain, no matter where they're going. Sarah tried to run. Her legs moved 3 steps before the mark on her shoulder flared with heat and her body locked in place. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, could only stand and watch as the elongated figures approached, their 2 long fingers reaching for her. They didn't hurt her, they didn't need to. They simply touched her shoulders, her arms, her back, and everywhere they touched, the mark spread. The 7 lines multiplied, covered her skin, sank deeper into muscle, into bone, into the core of who she was. And as the mark spread, Sarah felt herself changing. Her spine elongated, her fingers grew. Her perspective shifted as her neck stretched, lifting her head higher, giving her the view she'd need for the long hauls ahead. "You'll drive for us," the CB voice said, and now Sarah could see the speaker. Another marked driver, so covered in the symbol that their features were barely visible. "You'll haul the loads that keep the beneath world functioning, medicine that cures diseases that don't exist yet, food for populations that haven't been born, cargo from futures that might never arrive. The convoy drives across time, across possibility, across the spaces between what is and what could be, and you're part of it now." Sarah tried to speak, but her voice came out wrong, flat, emotionless, like the CB voice. "I don't want this." "What you want doesn't matter," the figure said. "You were marked before conception. Your genetic code carries the resonance. Your mother drove for us, your grandmother, your great-grandmother. This is generational. This is blood. This is the price some lineages pay for the gift of wanderlust. The need to drive isn't a need. It's programming. You were bred to be a convoy driver, and now the breeding has matured." They led her to a warehouse, Dock 127. A trailer waited there, attached to a black freightliner identical to all the others. The cargo was already loaded. She could hear it moving inside the trailer, scratching, breathing. Whatever she was hauling was alive, and her new body didn't care. Her elongated fingers gripped the clipboard, signed the manifest with handwriting that wasn't hers, and climbed into the cab. The mark on her shoulder had spread to her face now. She could see it in the rearview mirror, the 7 lines multiplying across her cheeks, her forehead, her lips. Soon she'd be nothing but marks, nothing but tally counts, nothing but a driver for the convoy that moved through the spaces beneath reality. The engine started on its own. The GPS displayed a route to nowhere, a destination that was simply labeled Delivery Point 7 when the road ALLOWS. And Sarah's hands moved to the steering wheel with the smooth certainty of something that had done this 1,000,000 times before. As she pulled out of the depot, she saw other marked drivers loading up, preparing for their own deliveries. Some had been at this for decades, some for centuries. She could tell by how covered they were. The old ones were more marked than flesh, walking tallies, human counters for deliveries that never ended. The convoy formed around her as she drove back up to the road that both did and didn't exist. 7 trucks, perfect formation. And Sarah Mitchell, who'd been a trucker for 9 years, who'd thought she loved the open road, understood that she'd never been driving toward anything. She'd been driving back, always back, to the depot that waited beneath the world, to the convoy that never stopped moving, to the tally mark that added her to a count that had been running since roads were invented, since humans first decided to carry loads from one place to another, since the ancient need to transport and deliver became something more than human, something that needed drivers, needed the marked, needed people like Sarah who'd been bred for this across generations. Her CB crackled. "Welcome to the convoy. Your first delivery awaits. Maintain formation. Do not stop. Do not question the cargo. Drive until the road tells you to stop. You have been marked. You are home." And Sarah drove, her elongated body fitting perfectly in the cab that had been built for marked drivers, her transformed hands comfortable on the wheel, her changed eyes seeing roads that normal humans couldn't perceive. She drove into the darkness, following routes that didn't exist on maps, hauling cargo that shouldn't be possible, part of a convoy that had been running since the first roads were built and would continue running until the last road crumbled to dust. The mark spread. The count continued. And somewhere behind her, another trucker was just now seeing 7 black trucks appear in their mirrors, just now feeling the warmth on their shoulder, just now discovering they'd been marked all along. Story 5, The Echo Load. Thomas Reeves heard the screaming from inside his trailer while fueling up at the Tesoro in Talk, and his blood went cold because he was hauling frozen seafood. 40,000 pounds of vacuum-sealed crab and salmon. Nothing that could scream. Nothing that could be alive. But the sound was unmistakable. Human voices, multiple overlapping, crying out in terror. He killed the fuel pump and ran to the back of his trailer, his boots slipping on ice. January 11th, 2023, minus 34 degrees, and Thomas's breath came in white clouds as he grabbed the trailer doors. The screaming stopped the moment his hand touched the handle. Complete silence. Just the wind and the distant hum of the fuel station's generators. Thomas had been driving for 16 years. He knew cargo, he'd hauled everything from live cattle to hazardous chemicals. He understood weight distribution, temperature control, load security, and he knew with absolute certainty that frozen seafood did not scream. But he'd heard it, clear as day, multiple voices overlapping in a chorus of terror that made his skin crawl even in the brutal cold. He opened the trailer doors. The refrigeration unit hummed, maintaining minus 10 degrees. His flashlight beam swept across pallets of white boxes, all properly stacked, all bearing the logo of Northern Catch Seafood Processing. Everything looked normal, but the temperature gauge on the reefer unit was wrong. It should read minus 10. Instead, it was climbing, minus 8, minus 6, minus 4. The refrigeration was losing its fight, and Thomas didn't understand why until he stepped inside the trailer. The air was warm, not cold. Warm, like stepping into a heated room instead of a frozen container, and the boxes were vibrating, all of them. A subtle movement that made the entire load seem alive, pulsing like a single organism. Thomas touched the nearest box. It was warm. He ripped it open, his hands shaking. Inside should have been vacuum-sealed bags of king crab legs. Instead, he found photographs, hundreds of them, all showing the same scene, a truck accident on a frozen highway. His truck. His exact Peterbilt 389, the same blue paint job, the same dent in the left rear panel he'd gotten in Whitehorse 2 years ago, and in every photograph his truck was destroyed, crushed, burned. And there was a body in the driver's seat, too mangled to identify but wearing his clothes, his wedding ring, his watch. The screaming started again, louder now, coming from every box. Thomas staggered backward and his flashlight caught movement in the far corner of the trailer. A figure, tall, impossibly thin, made of the same translucent plastic as the vacuum-sealed bags, and inside its transparent body were more photographs, more images of crashes, more versions of Thomas dying in different ways. "You're hauling echoes," a voice said behind him. Thomas spun. Another figure, this one made of frozen moisture that had taken human shape. "Ice person." It spoke with a voice like wind through cracks. "Echoes of the accident that's going to happen. That's always going to happen. That happened in every timeline except the one you're currently experiencing. Your cargo is the weight of all the deaths you've avoided, and it's getting heavier." Thomas ran. He didn't question, didn't argue, just moved. He made it out of the trailer, slammed the doors shut, and leaned against them, gasping. The fuel station attendant watched him through the window with concern. Thomas waved that he was okay, but he was okay. Nothing was okay. His cargo was screaming. His cargo contained photographs of his own death. His cargo was alive with the echoes of timelines where he'd already died. He climbed back into his cab with shaking hands and checked the manifest. Northern Catch Seafood Processing to Whitehorse Distributors. Standard load, standard route, nothing unusual, but stapled to the bottom of the manifest was a second sheet of paper he'd never seen before. A note handwritten. "Every driver carries the weight of their avoided deaths. Most never notice. You noticed. Now you can't unnotice. The echoes will get louder until the timeline corrects itself." Thomas grabbed his phone and called the dispatcher. "I need to return this load. Something's wrong with it." "Can't do that, Tommy," the dispatcher said. His voice sounded strange, distant, like he was speaking from very far away. "You signed for it. It's your load now, your responsibility. You have to deliver it." "It's not seafood. It's something else. I don't know what, but it's not what the manifest says." "All cargo is something else if you look deep enough," the dispatcher said. "Deliver the load, Tommy. Don't open the trailer again. Just drive. You're already behind schedule. The echoes are waiting." The call ended. Thomas tried to redial. The number didn't exist. He pulled up his dispatcher's contact info. The name was corrupted, showing as a string of symbols that hurt his eyes to look at. And his recent calls list showed only one entry, a call to himself 3 minutes in the future. The screaming from the trailer changed. It wasn't just screaming anymore, it was speaking, saying his name. Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. Hundreds of voices, all his own, all overlapping, all dying at different moments in different ways. He put the truck in gear and pulled out of the fuel station. He'd deliver the load. He'd get rid of it. Whatever was in that trailer, whatever echoes of death he was hauling, he'd drop them in Whitehorse and never think about them again. But as he merged onto the Alaska highway, heading for the Canadian border, the weight changed. His truck groaned, the suspension compressed. The steering became heavy. His load was getting heavier, even though nothing had been added. The rear axles strained, the tires bulged, and the scale weight display on his dashboard, which should have read 40,000 pounds of cargo, was climbing, 50,000, 60,000, 80,000 pounds. The weight of avoided deaths was increasing. "Every close call you've ever had," a voice said from his CB radio, even though it was turned off. "Every time you should have died but didn't. Every truck accident you saw in your mirrors and thought that could have been me." All of those echo deaths have been accumulating, building up, waiting for transport. And when a driver becomes aware of them, when they notice the weight they've been carrying, the echoes demand delivery. They demand to become real. Thomas's hands were welded to the steering wheel. The truck was barely moving now, struggling under impossible weight. The engine roared. The transmission screamed. And in his mirrors, he could see the trailer sagging, the axles bending, the whole rig threatening to collapse under the mass of deaths that existed in parallel timelines. "Where do I deliver this?" Thomas shouted at the CB. "To the moment of correction," the voice answered. "The echoes want to be real. They want to collapse from potential into actual. They want you to experience the deaths you've been avoiding. And there's only one place that can happen, the location of your next accident, the one that's been waiting for you since you started driving, the one that exists in every timeline, the guaranteed death." Thomas's GPS flickered and changed. His route was no longer to Whitehorse. It was directing him to a specific point on the Alaska highway. Mile marker 1342, a bridge over the Talk River in 6 miles, and his GPS displayed an arrival time, 11:47 p.m. He checked his clock, 11:41 p.m., 6 minutes, 6 miles. Perfect timing to arrive at the bridge at exactly the moment his echoes wanted to become real. He tried to slow down. His foot pressed the brake, but the truck didn't respond. The weight in his trailer was pulling him forward, gravity reversed, the mass of avoided deaths dragging him toward the point of correction. He tried to steer off the road. The wheel wouldn't turn. The echoes had control now. They'd been patient. They'd waited through 16 years of driving, through thousands of close calls, through every moment when Thomas should have died but didn't. And now they were hungry. Now they wanted their actualization. The bridge appeared ahead. A simple structure, steel and concrete, spanning the frozen Talk River. Nothing special about it, nothing dangerous. But Thomas understood with perfect clarity that this bridge existed in every timeline. In the timelines where he'd died in crashes, he'd never reached this bridge. In the timeline where he was still alive, he was about to reach it. And the echoes, all the death timelines he'd avoided, wanted to merge, wanted to make this the guaranteed point. The location where all possible Thomas Reeves died at once. His speedometer was climbing even though his foot wasn't on the accelerator. 60 miles per hour. 70. 80. The bridge rushed toward him, and Thomas heard the screaming from his trailer reach a crescendo. All of his voices, all of his deaths, crying out in anticipation. He didn't close his eyes. He watched it happen. Watched his truck hit the bridge approach at 93 miles per hour. Watched the overweighted trailer snap the fifth wheel coupling. Watched 40,000 pounds of echo deaths break free and slide forward, crushing his cab, pushing him through the windshield in a spray of glass and blood and screaming. But he also felt his truck pass over the bridge safely. Felt the rumble of the expansion joints under his tires. Felt himself continue driving, unharmed, the bridge receding in his mirrors. Both things happened. Both were real. Thomas existed in sewer position, dead and alive, crashed and safe, actualized and echoed. And in that moment of quantum existence, he understood what the cargo really was. He was hauling himself, all the versions of himself that had died in parallel timelines. They'd been loaded into his trailer, waiting for transport to a moment of convergence where all timelines could meet, and he'd delivered them. He'd brought all his deaths to the point where they could merge with his life. The truck continued down the Alaska highway. In his mirrors, Thomas saw the bridge, saw the crash, saw the burning wreckage, saw rescue crews pulling his body from the twisted metal, all of it happening in a parallel stream of time that existed alongside his current reality. He was alive, but he was also dead. Both were true. Both had been delivered. The echoes had gotten what they wanted, actualization. And Thomas had gotten what he'd always secretly feared, the confirmation that he'd died countless times in countless ways, and only thin probability had kept him alive this long. His CB radio crackled. "Delivery confirmed. The echo load has been received. Thank you for you." "Our service, Thomas. Your next load is already waiting. Because now that you've delivered yourself once, you'll do it again. And again. Every drive is a delivery of echoes now. Every mile brings you closer to the next correction point. You're not driving cargo anymore. You're driving fate, and fate always arrives on schedule." Thomas checked his manifest. The seafood delivery showed as complete, but a new order had appeared, another load of frozen seafood, same weight, same destination, same route. He was scheduled to drive the same highway tomorrow night, to pass the same bridge at 11:47 p.m., to deliver more echoes, more versions of himself from timelines where probability branched differently. And somewhere ahead at mile marker 1342, the bridge waited. It would always be waiting, in every timeline, in every version of reality where Thomas Reeves drove a truck. The bridge was the guaranteed point, the location where all his deaths converged, and he would deliver himself there again and again for as long as the echoes needed transport. Thomas drove into the darkness, his trailer heavy with versions of himself that had already died, heading toward the moment when those echoes would demand to be real again. The screaming had stopped, but that was worse. The silence meant the echoes were satisfied. They'd been delivered, and they were waiting for the next load.